born and raised on an organic farm. In 1981, when we came here, the next season we started planting a little bit of vegetables, similar to what we grew up, what I grew up with, and we went to the Kitchener Farmers Market. We had a little, what was it, like a 4-foot or 8-foot table where we displayed things, and we were very naive. We just played and grew things and saw how it turns out and what the consumer likes. And I always liked marketing and market and sales and people and all that. And with this, learned bit by bit what to grow. So at that point, it wasn't very structured or planned out or any of that because we didn't know. We just had no idea. New country, new language, knew everything. So it's about 42 years later, we adapted every year. Every year add-ons were made, the market changed, the stores changed, the way we market changed, packaging changed, everything constantly changed. And it was for our job to adapt, and we have to adapt quick because if there's a storm and you don't adapt, you get blown over. We didn't grow ambitiously the business. We just knew if you want to supply the industry, we need to get more efficient. We need to be able to compete. And unfortunately, scale is more competitive than very small scale. Today, everything we as a farm buy inbound, from fuel to labor to no matter what, is 4 to 5 times the cost of what it was in 1983. And everything we sell today isn't even double in price of what we sold in 1983. So you can add up yourself how strangling this is when inflation hits and interest hits and wage increases come one after the other, how a business, no matter what size you are, struggles. And the problem is even bigger with a bigger business because you struggle even more. So that's just something the industry is facing, and we are really trying to make it work. And size isn't the only thing. There's efficiency. You need to manage the teams. But right now, it's really hard to farm. But with this, we farm about 700 acres, about 400 or so in organic vegetables. It's all organic, but this is the organic vegetable side. We grow about 130 acres in carrots, lots of broccoli, all the greens. We kind of specialized over the year in all those greens that get bunched like dandelion and green onion and parsley and kales and all those things because nobody else does those. The only other option is kind of some product from Quebec and some out of the US. And with that, we sort of found a unique place within the industry. You can click. You see a field of lettuce. We used to grow a lot more in lettuce, but with all the markets going to pre-cut fresh salads, we don't grow so much anymore of that. A little bit about our soils. If you're all from Stratford area, you have very similar soils. Our soils were shaped by the Ice Age, and with all the movement around, a lot of our soil is not, for example, wind deposited or just unmoved soil. It was moved around by ice and by water when the ice melted and so on, and that separated stones, gravel, sand, clay, fine things. And with that, our mineral makeup may not be as balanced as if you would have a true, for example, a moraine section that would be just gravel and stone and everything, just the way the glacier dumped it. If you take those soils and analyze them, they may not be nice soils because they have a lot of stones in them, but they're high in calcium carbonate. Just the soil makeup is unique in there because it wasn't separated by water. And it's unbelievable how some of those gravel knolls can grow good crops compared to low soils that might be good in fertility, but they got certain items missing. For example, phosphate. One of those is which is a problem in this region, that phosphate is always short. Another thing is on the soil end, this region is shaped by the Niagara Escarpment. And the Niagara Escarpment, the top stone is dolomitic limestone, which is very high in magnesium. And to grow good crops, you want a calcium-magnesium ratio about 7-1. And our soils on the farm were 4-1, which means when you have that high of a magnesium level in your soil, it locks up other nutrients, it blocks them, it makes the soil very tight. So magnesium is good, but it needs to be in the kind of a right ratio. We didn't know these things in the beginning, and over time we went to training courses and so on and learned. For example, you can adjust your magnesium ratio because we had very high pH, because magnesium is one of the elements out of 4 that makes up pH. So pH is not a very helpful number because the question is which element makes it high or low. So it's magnesium, potassium, sodium, and calcium that make up the pH level. So we had high pH and an active calcium deficiency, which we had to learn all this. And then by adding gypsum, we add calcium, which is very reactive calcium. Dolomitic limestone is not reactive calcium. And the sulfur in the gypsum combines with the magnesium and washes away. So it was adjusting the ratio in 2 directions at once. And we only did that once on the farm, and it's been very stable ever since. We started making a lot of compost. We haven't had to add calcium. We didn't have to add gypsum or any of those items anymore. And things grow quite well once we were able to adjust that magnesium-calcium ratio. Phosphate is low. We add clay-based phosphate to our compost piles. And what happens is the clay in that phosphate makeup that comes from Florida binds the ammonia that would develop in a compost pile. And that bound ammonia breaks open the phosphate that is in a non-available form, and it makes it available very quickly. So inside that compost pile, you got that little factory going on, and the product coming out is good in phosphate. And so for us, mostly phosphate, but it has all the other nutrients that we need for growing. That's a little bit soil work, which is kind of important to do. You might know Liebig was the sort of the founder of the NPK story in agriculture, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate and potassium. Basically, all of soil science is sort of based on him. Modern agriculture is based on Liebig. And the fact that Liebig said of all known plant diseases, not a single one is the cause, is unique, because you wouldn't expect Liebig to say that, because that's a holistic approach. When we see a problem on the farm, this means that the problem usually is only the symptom. The problem is elsewhere. And that's in organic agriculture. When we have a problem, when we have a plant disease, when we have an insect problem, most of the times we don't have the tools to make that problem go away, just like that. Because what we see is a symptom, the cause of it is somewhere else. And it's our job to study what causes that. If I buy a quick fix, like an aspirin, all that does is it cuts the cable of the red oil light when your engine is low oil. It doesn't add oil. So we call it very simply the symptom treating approach, or looking for the real cause behind it. You add oil to the engine, the oil light will go out on its own. And for us on the farm, most of our problems we've had, the symptoms that show up, they go away if we can fix the problem. The second problem in organic farming is usually you don't have enough time in one season to do that. So what we need to do is study it and set the stage next year so that this doesn't show up. And what we've noticed, working with a lot more compost, we make a lot of compost out of vegetable waste, wood chip, tree leaves, and so on, that a lot of the problems we used to have with, for example, flea beetles or cucumber beetles, other plant diseases, they've sort of gone away, and we get good yields with very little attention on that end. One key thing, what we call potash in farming, the farmers talk about potash. The word potash came from the Romans. When the Romans were having big armies, cooking for this army, they had a lot of wood ash left over from their mass kitchens. And they learned that when they throw it in the field and grow stuff, things grow good. So it was called potash. That's where that came from. But that potash is not quite the same what gets sold to a farmer nowadays as potash. Because what we buy as potash is K, which is a component of what the Romans had as potash, but not entirely. And what we give the plants today, because it has a similar result, creates big cells in the plant, builds big structure. If you're a hay farmer, everybody spreads K, potassium, because it gives you good yield. But it has some slight side effect, which has to do with mineral uptake, which leads to lower nutrient density. And you can go on the US website and look for nutrient density. Research foods were tracked now for probably 50 years, where they measure the mineral content of products, food, vegetables, and so on. And it's called nutrient density, where crops grown with these types of minerals from the conventional side are lower in nutrient density. It's like you're buying low octane fuel for high octane fuel price. So as part of organic farming, we cannot use these materials like K, but with compost, when we do it, we get plenty of K or potassium, so that our potassium levels are not low, but we have a lot of other minerals coming onto the field. We can continue. So now we're going away from the mineral side to the living side. Inside the soil, you have a lot of organisms living. You have bacteria, you have nematodes, you have larger insects, and then you have worms and critters, and then organisms living on top of the soil. There's a simple term for it. It's called the soil food web. It starts with the plants making sugar, putting sugar down into the ground, and that sugar attracts bacteria. And there's actually communication going on. When the plant needs boron, it communicates, and that boron comes. The plant's roots cannot get at all the minerals. The plant needs this back and forth between microorganisms and fungi. Most of them, the mycorrhizal fungi that lives inside the plant, it it's almost like the mycorrhizal fungi is infesting, it's growing into the plant like a pathogen, but it's not hurting the plant. There's a symbiotic relationship between the two. And the plant communicates to the mycorrhizal fungi to get this and these minerals. And with that, that's the beginning of the soil food web, where the plant communicates and sends out sugar to attract them, and then they bring those minerals. And then these insects then again feed other ones. It's the food chain. It's always the bigger eating the smaller, but in the soil, it's called the soil food web. And the whole soil food web functions only because each participant in the soil food web leaves a little bit more than it takes. Imagine society would work like that. This is a picture of the mycorrhizal fungi. You find mycorrhizal in all soils. You find it in the wood forest. And if you look at a forest produces per acre more tonnage of wood than the field produces in yield on farmed crop. And forests don't get fertilized. That's because of the soil, the mycorrhizal fungi, which lives on tree roots and gets the trees what they need. We in our modern agriculture have reduced the mycorrhizal fungi a lot, and therefore we need to feed the plants more with soluble fertilizers, which again, the mycorrhizal don't like. You see two tomato plants here. There's a company that makes mycorrhizal fungi, and they made an experiment. They grew two tomatoes. One was inoculated with mycorrhizal fungi and one was not. And when they were at the same size, they just put them on the counter in the office and stopped watering both. And you can see that the one after 6 days was still green and standing because the mycorrhizal fungi in that stress situation was still giving enough water and nutrients to the tomato that it could stand, while the other one shriveled up. That just shows the effectiveness of the mycorrhizal fungi. That's a little clip of the nutrient density of vegetables with over the course of time, how it decreased with the way we farm today. So long time ago, if you talk to old immigrants, they say, oh, grapes tasted so much better in the old country, and this happened, and the flavor of food was different, and so on. That has to do with this. And if you want to know in North America, sort of feel the difference, you can buy, like, maybe not the Del Monte organic bananas, but you can buy some organic bananas that are, like, if you have the real fair trade bananas, they're growing in small communities down in the tropics. If you bring those bananas and eat one, and then you go to the supermarket and take a conventional one, you can taste the real difference in texture and in just the background flavor it leaves. We know that about our carrots, but I don't want to say that too loud, but yes, our carrots do taste different. They have 11 bricks, which is half as much of grapes. What you see in this slide is a nematode. And most people, when they hear nematodes on the farming community, they think, oops, nematodes, that's a big problem. They eat our roots. I don't know how well it gets taught that out of 11 species of nematode, only one eats roots. All the other ones are beneficial. And our modern agriculture reduced the population of the beneficial nematodes by so much that the root-feeding nematodes become dominant. And then they eat the roots of the problem, and the farmer feels, oops, the nematodes are eating my crops. In reality, that's only a symptom that we lost our beneficial population of nematodes. And then when you call for help, they say you got to go fumigate your soil. So they fumigate the soil to kill those root-feeding nematodes. But with that fumigant, you kill also the very last few of beneficial nematodes you have. So we cut the branch off on which we're sitting. Kind of a feeling is, so we in our industry can buy nematodes, and we have done that. We bought beneficial nematodes and released them through the sprayer. You can put them in a rainy day, you spray them, and the water makes them go into the ground. And the beneficial nematodes are extremely effective. If somebody on onions has thrips, that's a wee little tiny insect that crawls in the dew on the surface. You can spray beneficial nematodes overnight, and they don't die on the surface of the plant because of the dew. And in the meantime, they eat the thrips. When the sunshine comes in the morning, they'll either find a way into the ground or they die, but in the meantime, they reduce the thrip. So that's working with beneficial insects, and nematodes is a beneficial insect. If we know how to manage it, we can manage all kinds of things. I don't know if this clip can actually make it move. The one clip, you can see the small nematode is the root feeding one, and the bigger one is the other, and or it's the other way around. It moves, and you can see how it eats it. They made it under a microscope. They were able to make it a little clip of it.
Is there another one? Oh, right there.
You can see the bigger nematode is the beneficial one, and the other one is the root feeding one. And a scientist that discovered this was actually able to make that through the microscope, see both nematodes and see them how one goes after the other. Flea beetles is a native insect, and it goes after cold crop plants. And it's difficult sometimes when the weather is hot and dry to bring up direct seeded like kale and so on. So most of the kale crops get transplanted. All the like kale, broccoli, cauliflower, they get transplanted because the small seedlings, just as they come up, they can be ruined by these guys. But again, they're only a symptom that that the plants are having stress with nitrogen. If we have a green material worked into the ground and it's decaying, and during that decay phase, a lot of nitrogen is freed up, the plant grows different and sweats different, and it attracts these guys. A week later, this wouldn't be a problem. And we on the farm had to learn when to plant after we worked down cover crops to not have that nitrogen spike, which creates this. Nitrogen spikes also produce aphids. So if you buy broccoli and cauliflower in the winter from California and it's got aphids in it, it's very simple. In the cool weather of Southern California, it's not that hot at that time of the year. Their soil doesn't release so much nitrogen. So back in the older days, they would use a product called sodium nitrate, which in Canada was not considered an organic fertilizer. In California, it is. They would put that, and it would green up the crops. It would green up the kale. Would make it grow, but also bring aphids. So that's why the California crops a lot of times have aphids in them on the organic side, because they push it so much with nitrogen to make it speed up. So as soon as they reduce nitrogen, the aphids would fade away. Tarnished plant bug, you all know it maybe. Its most favorite host crop is alfalfa. When the farmers cut alfalfa, they lost their host plant until the new ones grow. And since they're so super mobile, they move around. They move into your strawberry patch and create those little runt strawberries. They go into lettuce, bite the leaf rib. They go into broccoli, make the yellow buds on top. They do a lot of things, so they're difficult to manage. over the years, like we can't spray them really. We just have to hope that they leave us a bit. Leek moth. Leek moth is an imported invasive species, you could call it. It's new to Canada for the last probably 10, 15 years. The interesting thing is the Canadian government, like actually Agriculture Canada, studied the leek moth, where it's coming from, and it comes somewhere in Asia. And they were able to identify its natural predator, where it came from. I don't know which country. And they brought it to Canada and tested it and found that it's not moving around onto other species. It sticks with leek moth. So from Ottawa, they did research with this and identified all leek growing farms. We were one of them. And they came and brought just a few of this insect and released them. And they've done it over a few times, and they have also kept monitoring. Every year they put out monitoring on the leek moth beneficial insect, and we have been able to grow quite successfully leek with not having the leek moth problem. What the leek moth does is it tunnels. Just like you see the mice under the snow in the winter tunnel under the snow, the leek moth does that inside the leek leaves. It's tunneling. And when it does that, and it's too much, you can't sell it. That's also why it's United States bans any green onions or leek from Canada. They probably have it too, but they want to ban it. The next insect we have the most of are the green worms and cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower, and you probably all know them if you garden. You can use trichogramma wasps on those. They're very effective. The question is where to get trichogramma wasp. And there's a company in Quebec that raises them, and you can release them. Trichogramma wasps are very effective in sweet corn for the corn borers, go in the cobs, and so on. Where we are at the moment not using them. We used to use them a lot when we did broccoli only, but since we started growing cauliflower, there's so much surface area that the trichogramma wasp isn't effective enough. So we had to spray BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's again a bacteria that causes the worm diarrhea, and the diarrhea dehydrates the worm, and then he dies. Just like if you're a dairy farmer and your calves have diarrhea, they die from dehydration. I guess the same thing, but that way we don't have the worms, and the people don't really enjoy buying broccoli or cauliflower with worms. Sweet midge, again, is an import. Can you say that louder? The green worms, not much, but sometimes they like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. They do go in the kale, but not that much. Now, sweet midge is a microscopic insect that came in from Asia also, and started ruining the North American broccoli growing, basically, with even in the conventional farm up to 80% yield loss. They go into the small plant and lay the egg in it. So if you spray them, even with the most toxic insecticides, they're not eating the plant. So if you put a systemic material like admire into a broccoli and the sweet midge isn't eating the broccoli, it's not dying. So it's a real problem. So again, we have to manage and work around the insect's life cycle and the way it moves around, and it doesn't fly very well. It's not very mobile. For example, so we start transplanting in the spring in the middle of the field, not at the edge, because they overwinter in the hedgerows, and then they move into the first row and to the next and the next and the next. If you start in the middle, there's this big gap where they So this way they don't know yet that the kale broccoli is over there, and so on. All kinds of tricks you have to use to work around them, so that we have less damage. It's a problem. Sweet midge is a real problem. And when the heads look funny, you can't sell them. You can move on. Lady beetles. They are a beneficial insect. You find them on flowers. They eat a little bit of pollen, but most of the time they are aggressive and they eat other insects. Like they go after aphids. If you have aphids and you buy a 5-gallon pail of ladybugs and you let them go, they go after the aphids. They live mostly on other insects. Yellow jacket wasps do the same, so they are extremely beneficial. When they come in the fall to you, when you sit outside, it's just because the worm population everywhere goes down, and then they're hungry. So, but they don't come to sting you because you're sitting there. They want to sip on your drink because they're after the food. If you know that, you let them have a bit and they don't bother. When you have an ice cream, they're after the sugar. But the yellow jackets are an extremely beneficial insect to go after worms. In this, you see a compost pile. We have a compost turner. It's a machine that kind of has a big drum, and it kind of goes under the compost pile, turns the outside in and the inside out, and mixes it, and then it gets aerated, and it breaks down compost well. To make good compost, you need some ingredients, and the key ingredients are: you need carbon, you need nitrogen, you need sugar, you need water, you need air. If the carbon-nitrogen ratio in the compost pile is too close, that means not enough carbon, too much nitrogen product, it starts to stink. The moment you have enough carbon and the organisms and the sugar to feed them and the oxygen, your microorganisms will take all of that protein or nitrogen and tie it to the carbon, which makes it stable, and it doesn't smell. And when you're done, the compost smells like the soil in the forest. When you move the leaves away and take some of that and take a smell, that's what the compost smells like. And we can take dairy manure with a side unloading manure spreader and throw it against the wood chip pile and turn it in. After a little while, you smell nothing of the dairy manure or pig manure or anything you put on it, because the carbon not only absorbed it, but the microorganisms took the nitrogen, which would normally turn to ammonia and start to stink. They would take that and tie it to the nitrogen, and it is stable. If you have any kind of carbon material, it could be cardboard, could be wood chip, could be any of that, and you put any of your vegetable waste on it, it would never start to smell, or the water wouldn't run out the bottom. And if even in the spring it's cold and it's not getting going very well, all you need to do is cut your grass and put the clippings on the wood chip pile. It makes it go off like a rocket. It turns like 150, 160 degree Fahrenheit from the sugar that's in the grass. There's an unbelievable amount of sugar in the fresh, young, green grass that makes the organisms and bacteria inside the pile react so quickly that they produce so much heat that this gets so hot. The heat in the compost pile comes from the microbes living and producing that heat. I brought the slide back up at the soil food web because we took a little bit of a detour through all these different things, and now you can see how all these different players on this stage play together to make the soil work and be active. And if you would take one of them out or overproduce another, it would offset the whole soil food web in one way or another way. And that is shown by some research completely away from our farm, but it makes the point very clearly. You might know in the Yellowstone Park in the United States is a region where they killed all the wolves a long time ago, and the entire region was without wolves, and that changed the entire ecosystem. And you wonder, the wolves, they kill other animals. Yes, they do, but the wolves being gone made the deer population spike. But the wolves didn't eat all those deer, but it made the population spike. It's just like, compare it, you take the police off the road. Everybody knows there's absolutely no police. Everybody would drive completely crazy. All you need to do is put a few cars out there and give a little bit of time. Everybody will realize police is on the road and you drive careful over here and he is over there. They released just a few wolves after, I think, 80 years back into the Yellowstone Park. And the changes that took place is phenomenal. And it's very well articulated how the ecosystem responded by releasing or reintroducing just a few wolves. It changed the deer's behavior, it changed the bear's behavior, it changed all the other little critters' behavior. Trees started growing different because the deer that would go down into the smaller ravines, eat down all those trees, erosion set in. The deer stayed out of those ravines because they were afraid they'd be attacked. And then all of a sudden, different bushes grew, berries grew, which brought groundhogs and other little animals. This is very, very inspiring. If you watch that, it only is like 5 or 10 minutes of how the Yellowstone Park changed by reintroducing a missing link to the ecosystem. Totally fascinating. We in the farm say, we're out there. We have to be mindful. We have to fit in the system. On the business end, we try to fit into the marketplace. As an employer, you try to fit into what we need to do, but we can't just be blown over quick. Just like that little, it's actually a rutabaga. We had a very strong, hard rainstorm after they were planted, and we thought they're all cemented into the ground. They would never come up. Till walking the field and seeing, well, what does it look like? I saw all these little things popping up, and I looked, and under almost every one of them, I found a rutabaga pushing up through the crust. With that determination, you can achieve a lot.